What is good, YouTube Nation and fantasy football owners? Chris Pearson here with you. As always, it is the week 10. I always do that. The week 10 edition of the FFSR, the Fantasy Football Stock Report for your team, your league, your game. This is your home. You know where it's at for the latest and greatest fantasy football information out there to help you get a victory this week. I apologize a little bit for the lateness of this video. It is Thursday night as I'm recording this. It's been a little late lately, and that's because of my schedule. As you guys probably know, this time of year, November getting into December, it's really busy at my workplace, working in retail, so it's getting really crazy with the scheduling. So bear with me as I record these videos a little later than usual. Again, I apologize for that, but that's just the way it kind of goes. So, but again, I'm trying to get this video recorded and uploaded before Thursday night game starts. I'm wearing orange tonight because we got to see a lot of orange tonight in the game, Browns, Bengals. So a lot to get to this week. Again, this is another week where there are 6 teams on bye this week, and actually a lot of these teams, big players you're not going to have. You're not going to have the Colts this week, so no Andrew Luck, no T.Y. Hilton, no Ahmad Bradshaw, no Trent Richardson. No San Diego this week, so no Phillip Rivers, no Brandon Oliver, no Ryan Matthews when he comes back healthy, no Keenan Allen, no Antonio Gates. No New England this week, no Tom Brady, no Gronk, no Julian Edelman, no potentially running game with Jonas Gray. These guys are getting mixed in. So a lot of teams, with the star players that are not going to have this week. So we got to find guys that are going to really do a fill-in for us, do us a solid, if you will, and really shine for us this week. We're having some of our guys out that are on bye this week. So there's a lot of things, and I had to make a lot of moves this week. My team just got destroyed by the top team in the league last week. They proved it. They showed why they were the top team. They had like 8 of their 9 guys in double figures. My guys didn't really step up. We still had a good week point-wise, but I'm fighting for a wild card spot now. I'm at 5-4, so it's tough right now. We've got to get guys with points. So I did make a couple moves this week in order to do that. I got guys on the wire, guys like Mark Sanchez now starting for the Eagles now that Nick Foles is out with a broken collarbone. Guys like Devontae Adams to the Packers at wide receiver. And even a long-term ad as well. You got to really think long-term at this point because you've still 5 weeks to worry about. You got to think long-term. So I made a switch at kicker. I got the Cardinals kicker, Chandler Catanzaro, the rookie who has yet to miss a field goal this season, by the way. And I got Josh Gordon, who will come back for the Browns in Week 12. So, and now what to make of Adrian Peterson? Because as you guys are probably aware, he got his trial, I guess, if you want to call it, resolved. He took the misdemeanor charge instead of the felony, so now he's going to avoid jail time, he's going to pay a fine, and be on probation, and yada yada, do community service, that kind of thing. But what's his status now? With the NFL, are they going to take him off the commissioner exempt list? And some reports are even saying that he might play as soon as week 11, but we'll see. Now, if you have the room, if you have an availability to maybe stash Peterson while this thing plays itself out, by all means, go ahead. But I'm just worried that I think Gordon is a safer move, and that's why I went after him instead of Peterson, because for sure that Gordon's coming back week 12. With Peterson, it's really kind of is the NFL really going to allow that? What's going to happen? So, again, if you have the room, if you want to make a move and take the risk, by all means, go for it. But I'm just really worried about what direction the NFL is going to take, especially after all the PR and controversy disaster that it's gone through. So again, a lot to get to with all the bye weeks, with these situations playing themselves out. Who are we going to look for this week? Who's not going to be recommended to play with some tough matchups? Let's get right into it. Now, we're going to start, because it is Thursday night, we are going to start with the Thursday night matchup. And I'm just going to break down the numbers here and who I think out of the skill players is a really good option this week. In terms of the passing games, it's pretty middling. Cleveland, the Browns are 14th in passing offense. The Bengals are 15th. So really, when you look at Brian Hoyer and Andy Dalton, I really can't rate either of them as anything more than kind of QB2s or a bye-week replacement for a top guy like a Brady or a Luck. I would prefer Dalton, though, to Hoyer because obviously, Dalton has A.J. Green back. He gets his top weapon is now back. Mohamed Sanu is playing well for Andy Dalton. So I would prefer him to Brian Hoyer. But because Hoyer really only has a bunch of middling guys. Andrew Hawkins is questionable for this game with a thigh and a knee issue, so that's up for debate. He still doesn't have Jordan Cameron at tight end. He's out. So until the Browns get Josh Gordon back, I don't think that Brian Hoyer really is a serviceable quarterback option. Again, a desperate QB2 or bye-week fill-in, but I would prefer Andy Dalton to Brian Hoyer. In terms of the wide receivers, if Hawkins plays, I think you can use him as a wide receiver 3, especially in PPR leagues where he has been very beneficial this season as well. But again, really the only Browns guy you can trust until Gordon and Cameron come back. Obviously, A.J. Green, Mohamed Sanu, yes, even Sanu I think is a no-brainer start. Green a normal wide receiver 1. Sanu a wide receiver 2 I think with serious upside because he has been playing well. Even when A.J. Green was out, obviously he was getting a lot of the targets, but now even with A.J. Green back, he's still getting targets from Andy Dalton. He's still playing very well. I think that continues. There's plenty of looks to go around. Green can't catch every pass, so I think Sanu is a worthy wide receiver 2 option. In terms of the running game, these teams are both really, really bad against the run. Toward the bottom of the league, Cincinnati is 30th, Cleveland is 31st. So you would think on the Cleveland side of things that would be a great thing for them. But here's the problem. The Cleveland running situation is a mess. It is an absolute dumpster fire. It's a disaster. You don't know which of these guys is going to shine on a week-to-week basis. Now, last week, it looks like that Terrence West, the rookie out of Towson, who just a couple weeks ago was a healthy scratch, is now going to get the work again. It looks like he may have passed Bente and Isaiah Crowell on the depth chart. So, personally, I would avoid this situation altogether. I tried Isaiah Crowell at different times this season, didn't pan out. So, and I think he was really the more explosive back. I would say probably him, then West, and then Tate, just because Tate is always struggling with injury, always, has had that throughout his career. So, if you have to play one, go with Terrence West. He's really more of a desperate RB2 or 3. I can't recommend Ben Tate and Isaiah Crowell just because of the fact that this committee situation is such a mess. You don't know what Mike Pettine's going to do. But Jeremy Hill for Cincinnati is a no-brainer RB1 this week. Giovanni Bernard is already officially out. He's out with the hip and the clavicle issues. So Jeremy Hill shined last week in that starting role. Clearly a no-brainer RB1. He's going to get a lot, obviously, all the work. Jeremy Hill, strong starting options. He might even be the start of the week because he's going to shine in this matchup, guaranteed. So that's the Thursday night game. So now we are looking again. We're going to look here again as we always do. Otherwise, for the Sunday games, position by position, starting with the quarterback position. And really, the first few obviously are no-brainers. Two quarterbacks have the best match to probably ask for this week. That's Peyton Manning of Denver and Ben Roethlisberger of Pittsburgh. I mean, Manning going up against the Raiders. Hey, after a week of struggling against New England, no better remedy than going to Oakland and playing the 0-8 winless Oakland Raiders, right? Yeah, and it's and so obviously a great matchup there. Your Broncos are pretty much must starts this week again, except Wes Welker. He might not even play because of the back injury, but Peyton Manning, Demaryius Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders, Julius Thomas, Broncos defense, you're starting them against the Raiders this week, bar none. And Ben Roethlisberger, it's hard to believe just a few weeks ago we were talking about how Big Ben was struggling and how he really wasn't looking great in games, how teams were shutting him down. And now these last 2 weeks, he has looked like a man on fire against Indianapolis and Baltimore, two actually really good teams. Ben has just carved them up, 6 touchdowns each week. And you know what? He might have a chance to do it again this week against the Jets. I mean, because the Jets obviously are terrible. We know this. Big Ben is becoming now a rock-solid QB1. I mean, he clearly, you can't sit him this week unless you have Peyton Manning or Aaron Rodgers, who is going to play this week. The hamstring is no longer an issue, it looks like. So he is playing against the Bears. So unless you have one of those two, maybe even Drew Brees, but if you have Big Ben and not then have an option above him, you can't sit him against the Jets. It's a dream matchup. They're projected for all three of those guys, Peyton, Aaron Rodgers, and Ben Roethlisberger, are projected for 30-plus points. I don't see any reason why they can't get there. You're definitely starting those guys. Drew Brees at home against San Francisco. The Niners are 22nd against the pass, or actually, I'm sorry, they're 22nd on offense. The Niners are actually strong against the pass. They're third against the pass, but come on, it's Drew Brees. He's matchup proof at home. San Francisco just lost to the Rams. I mean, this to me is also a no-brainer. Carson Palmer against the Rams, again in a week where, and again, likely not, at this point, probably not available in your league, so probably owned. But Carson Palmer definitely is a strong option this week against the Rams. Again, the Rams struggling, even though they beat San Francisco. Arizona is at home, where they play much better. The Rams are 8th against the pass, but why would you not want to have that momentum in your lineup if you're Carson Palmer? Or a Carson Palmer owner. So you'll definitely want to keep going with him. So there's your top 5. Peyton, Rodgers, Big Ben, Brees, Carson Palmer. All of those are strong QB1s. All of them should be considered starting options. You probably can't find them in your league for a bye week fill-in, but if you have, say, a Big Ben or Carson Palmer as maybe a QB2 normally, and your top guy like a Luck or Brady is not there this week, you can put those guys in and get great numbers from them. Next 5 at quarterback, Matthew Stafford, Russell Wilson, Matt Ryan, Cam Newton, Jay Cutler. I'm not surprised that Matthew Stafford is as high as he is, because obviously Matthew Stafford now gets the benefit of probably, in all likelihood, getting Calvin Johnson back. Obviously, with Calvin Johnson back, Matthew Stafford's value significantly increases. And the thing about Miami is stout against the run, as we have seen. So Miami is going to want to force Detroit to throw. So what does that mean? It means more Matthew Stafford. It means more Calvin Johnson. It means more Golden Tate. It means also potentially throwing to Joique Bell and Theo Riddick out of the backfield. So I think you're going to see a lot of that. I think Matthew Stafford is a great play this week as his usual QB1 self, especially now that his top weapon is back. I'm surprised to see Russell Wilson, though, as high as he is. As 7th and projected for 22 points, I'm quite surprised to see that, because I gotta admit, I'm not a fan of Russell Wilson this week. I mean, because Seattle's rate lately has been pushing the running game, and the passing offense just really has not been there. Now, even though the matchup with the Giants this week at home, let me find the sheet here, is a good one because the Giants are 28th against the pass. I really can only recommend them as a high QB2 because, again, they're pushing the running game. The Giants aren't exactly great against the run either, so you're going to see a lot of Marshawn Lynch. And really, if you think about it, yes, Doug Baldwin is getting a lot of the targets in Seattle, but is he really separating himself from the pack as a top wideout option? I don't know. I'm really concerned. I'm quite surprised to see him that high. Again, though, with all these buys, you probably can't afford to sit Russell Wilson, but I'm just a little worried about him. Not fully worried as in, oh my gosh, you should sit him because he struggled, Russell Wilson, but I'm just a little worried. I'm just surprised to see him that high. I'm not surprised to see Matt Ryan where he's at 8th. Matt Ryan, hello, he's playing Tampa Bay. And do you remember on a Thursday night what happened when Atlanta last played Tampa Bay? Oh, yeah, I believe they destroyed them, something like 56-14. This is a great week again to start your Falcons. Again, playing Tampa. Tampa is still Tampa. Even though, there's some players there that are going to possibly make fantasy impact, they're still struggling. They're still who they are. They are who we thought they were. They're still struggling. start Matt Ryan, start Julio Jones, start Roddy White. You're starting these guys regardless in this amazing matchup, even though it's on the road, where Atlanta usually tends to struggle. This is a dream matchup. Start Matt Ryan this week. Cam Newton going up against the Eagles. That's tough. But it's on Monday night. Now, Philly, though, they are not great against the pass. They are 22nd. But this is going to be a shootout game. I think this Monday night game is going to be fun. It's going to be entertaining. This is a great game to end the fantasy week with Carolina and Philly. A lot of these guys are going to be in your lineups, I think. So I think you have to play him. I think you have to play him as his usual QB, 1-2 self, because his running ability is still strong. Plus, he's got weapons there in Carolina. So I think you can definitely go with Cam Newton as a strong starting option this week in that Monday night game. You'll want to start your guys, I think, in that Carolina-Philly game Monday night. And Jay Cutler is rated 10th. But the thing about Jay Cutler is, as he goes, so goes Chicago. And I think in this game, though, with Green Bay, because the Packers are so putrid against the run, I think you're going to see a lot more of Matt Forte and not really less Jay Cutler, but not as much as you're used to seeing. Now, obviously, usually when Green Bay and Chicago get together, it's usually a pretty fun game. And usually for fantasy purposes, we like seeing that, that the numbers go up for these guys. But Cutler struggled of late. Obviously, you're not sitting his receivers. You're not sitting Brandon Marshall. You're not sitting Alshon Jeffrey. And you're probably not sitting Martellus Bennett at tight end either. But it just worries me that I think the passing game isn't going to be as productive as possibly it might be. Because I think you're going to see potentially more opportunities for Matt Forte to carve up that Packers, run defense. So, Cutler for me, again, in a week with all these buys, if you have to start him, sure, he's usable, but I don't really see him as this high. He's projected for 21 points. He might get there, but then again, he might be a little bit under that, just a tad. Not by much, but just a little bit, because again, I think the opportunities aren't going to be as prevalent, because I think you're going to see a lot of Matt Forte. So just be wary. I'm a little bit wary, but again, it's kind of like that same about with Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson, Jay Cutler, I'm surprised they're in the top 10. I don't love either of them this week, but I don't hate them either. They're kind of like, for me, more mid-tier guys. I love Matt Ryan. I love Cam Newton. Not really in love with Russell Wilson or Jay Cutler in terms of a top 10 quarterback play. 11 through 15, according to my CBS league, looking at these guys: Tony Romo, Mark Sanchez, Joe Flacco, Ryan Tannehill, Eli Manning. Now, this affects me a little bit because I have Tony Romo. He's been my guy all season. But obviously the back issue was concerning. I had to start Eli Manning last week because Romo was out. Now, all signs, at least early indications, are pointing to that Tony Romo is going to play this week against the Jaguars. Obviously, we want that for our fantasy purposes because, one, as Herm Edwards would say, hello, it's the Jaguars, and that's obviously a great matchup. Even though they're playing across the pond in London, it's a great matchup regardless, so obviously we want to have Tony Romo if he's playing. But I have to make a disclaimer. Boy, I'm really going out on a limb with this one. I think Brandon Weeden in a week of buys, if he plays, is a serviceable QB2. I hate to say that, I really do, but it's the Jaguars. If you can't put up points as a fantasy quarterback against the Jaguars, you are not relevant in fantasy, okay? I'm sorry. It's just the way it seems to go. So I think regardless of who's at quarterback for Dallas, is a serviceable option against Jacksonville. But if it's obviously Tony Romo, then he's obviously a QB1. But if Romo is still out, if something happens later in the week where he is going to be out, then I think if he's been available in your league or if you picked him up off waivers, Mark Sanchez, take off the green jet-colored glasses and put on some Eagles Kelly green, because Mark Sanchez is going, I think, to do wonders in this Philly offense. It's a Chip Kelly offense, and going up against a Carolina defense that has been horrible all season long, mostly been absolutely terrible, hasn't been able to, I mentioned, stop a nosebleed. Mark Sanchez is going to thrive. There's really I think no big drop-off from Foles to Sanchez. So he did well while Foles was out last week, performed well. I can't see how he can fail. In this offense, in the Jet offense, yeah, because it's the Jets. There were ways for him to fail. I can't really see a scenario where Mark Sanchez really struggles in this offense. So right now I'm prepared to use Sanchez this week, but if Romo plays, I probably will change that. But because the fact he's playing on Monday night, maybe I keep Sanchez in my lineup because I want points on Monday night. So just if you're in that situation where maybe you're dealing with a Romo Sanchez, or you're on a bye, and, or you're kind of torn between, like, say, a Russell Wilson and a Sanchez, or a Jay Cutler and a Sanchez, you don't know which direction to go, I like Mark Sanchez. I really do. And Matthew Berry, who I read all the time, is also a Mark Sanchez fan. So how can I go against that? Just saying. Out of the next three, between Flacco, Tannehill, and Eli Manning, obviously I think Joe Flacco has the best matchup of that bunch. I mean, come on, he's playing Tennessee. The Titans are not exactly world beaters. This is going to be a big week for the Ravens. This is a great, great matchup. I think Joe Flacco is definitely usable as a strong QB1-2 bye-week fill-in as well. Now, Ryan Tannehill and Eli Manning, while they have played well of late, I'm not in love with either this week. If I were to pick one, it probably would be Eli against Seattle, actually, just because of the fact that he has, he's done well on a consistent basis. He's somehow still earning fantasy points, even in garbage time. Even when the game was all but over against the Colts, he was able to still put up good yardage and points late. So at least had that going for him. Tannehill has been red hot, but now he's playing in Detroit against a defense that is strong against the pass. I think you're going to see a lot of Lamar Miller if he plays, as long as he's healthy. He's still got Mike Wallace as a weapon to throw to, and Charles Clay at tight end, yes, but the Lions are going to key in on that. They're going to try to make his day miserable. So, not sold on Ryan Tannehill this week. If you have to use him as a QB2 or a bye-week fill-in, you can. It's a really risky play. And Eli is the same way. A QB2 bye-week fill-in, but very, very risky. If I had to pick one, I would actually pick Eli just because I think there's more opportunity for him to get garbage time points. And I really think the Lions' D is going to really try to make Tannehill's day as miserable as possible. Not that Seattle isn't going to do that to Eli, but Seattle is also very stout against the run. They're not going to let Andre Williams or Rashad Jennings beat them. Eli's going to have to throw, so I think the opportunities are there more for Eli than they are for Ryan Tannehill. Quarterback 16 through 20, now we're really digging deep at this point if you're really, really desperate. Again, there's Andy Dalton. He's rated 16th. Again, I like him over Brian Hoyer if you need a QB2 or a bye-week fill-in. I like Dalton in this matchup tonight. Colin Kaepernick, I got to say, I'm surprised he is this low. Maybe it's just because of the fact that the Niners are coming off a loss to the Rams, or maybe it's because they have to go to New Orleans. But again, if you're needing a strong QB 1-2 this week with upside, I like Colin Kaepernick. The matchup does not scream tough. New Orleans is 27th against the pass. I mean, good grief. He's had a rough go of it, but to me, I think he's very usable. So I'm surprised that Colin Kaepernick is rated that low. I think certainly he's very usable this week if you need the help at quarterback. I love Colin Kaepernick this week out of that group. So I would say I would prefer him over Andy Dalton. If you're torn between, if you're debating on, do I use Kaepernick, do I use Dalton? I would take Kaepernick in a heartbeat because, to me, I just think that the matchup just screams that it's just a little bit better and more weapons. So at least, with either way, with Crabtree Bolden or Green Sanu, it might be a coin flip, but I would prefer Kaepernick actually. Out of the next three, I really can't recommend as any of these next three as starting matchups. maybe Kyle Orton if you're desperate, because look, obviously Kyle Orton has earned the start. As I mentioned on here, he's earned the starting job in Buffalo. He's done well of late, but here's the issue. He's playing Kansas City this week, and Kansas City is first in the league against the pass. That's a very, very tough matchup for Kyle Orton. So, again, if there's better options out there than Kyle Orton, obviously go after them. But if Kyle Orton is the best option left out there left for you, then and again, you can use maybe as a QB2 or 3, but only as a desperate play. After that, that's really all I can really recommend. None of these guys I would really recommend starting this week. You're not starting Michael Vick against the Steelers. Blake Bortles against Dallas. Mettenberger at Baltimore, no. Maybe you get away with Alex Smith at Buffalo. The matchup is tough, but Alex Smith is usually a serviceable QB2 or bye-week fill-in, so maybe you can use him. But then after that, you're not really touching these guys. Derek Carr, no, not against Denver. Josh McCown is back at quarterback at Tampa Bay, and for the Tampa Bay whatevers, everybody said, yay! Remember the last time Josh McCown played Atlanta? Yay! Yeah, and he hurt his thumb. Yay! And that led to the somewhat emergence of Mike Glennon. Yay! And Vincent Jackson and Mike Evans' fantasy value may downgrade a little bit. Okay, I think I've made my point, right? You're not starting Josh McCown against Atlanta. I mean, unless you're really playing in a 3-quarterback, 4-quarterback league, you're not playing Josh McCown. And you're not playing Brian Hoyer, again, unless, you're really desperate. And you're not playing Austin Davis at Arizona. No. You're not really playing any Rams. Let's just say that. You're not playing any Rams at the 7-1 Arizona Cardinals. You'd be stupid. You'd be the stupid idiot owner if you did. Gosh, Tampa Bay, why? Why are you going back to Josh McCown? I understand your record is terrible, but at least with Mike Glennon, you had a passing offense. With Josh McCown, he was terrible at quarterback. I don't know why you're going back to him. I mean, if you're playing a receiver, I think you're playing Mike Evans because he has emerged as the top guy. If you're playing a running back, you're playing Bobby Rainey. Even though Charles Sims is coming back this week off IR, I don't really see him as a threat right now. Maybe further on down the line, but not right now. But I don't get it. I don't get this move. I'm quite confused by that move. But no fantasy relevance. You're not playing Josh McCown. All right, moving on to the running backs. There we go. It's a little slow. Running backs, top 5. I'm pretty sure I know who's at the top. Matt Forte. I just mentioned it. Green Bay is 32nd against the run. You're going to see a lot of Matt Forte. I mean, it's pretty obvious. So, again, that's why I'm not fond of Jay Cutler, because I think you're going to see a lot of Matt Forte. So Matt Forte should be in your lineups. It's a given. Normally it's a given every single week, but you're starting Matt Forte. I mean, it's to me a no-brainer. You're starting Marshawn Lynch because, again, I mentioned it. Seattle's passing offense is struggling right now, and they're handing the rock back to Marshawn Lynch, who for some reason, earlier in the season, Pete Carroll admitted it, we're not giving the ball to Marshawn Lynch. Why? Why in the heck were you not giving the ball to Marshawn Lynch? He's named Beast Mode and eats Skittles for a reason, because that's just who he is, and he can take the whole Oakland defense with him for a touchdown. I mean, come on, man. Sorry, ESPN. But, I mean, you're using Marshawn Lynch. The Giants are 22nd against the run. There's no reason to sit Marshawn Lynch. You're using Marshawn Lynch. So those two are no-brainers. DeMarco Murray is obviously a no-brainer against Jacksonville. The top 3, 18 points projected. They're no-brainers. LaShawn McCoy, you're starting your Eagles and Panthers. Can we just pretty much say that? You're starting your normally guys who start with the Eagles and Panthers. So Mark Sanchez, LaShawn McCoy, Jeremy Maclin, Cam Newton, Kelvin Benjamin, and Greg Olsen. I mean, those 6 for that Monday night game are a given. To me, they're a given. So LaShawn McCoy, you're starting him, and look who is 5th on this list. Ronnie Hillman. You think we're afraid of a Monty Ball comeback? As Maroon 5 was once saying, I don't think so. I know it was a little bit bad in terms of the notes. I don't think so. It's kind of better. That's my Adam Levine right there. My best Adam Levine, if you will. We're not afraid of Monty Ball, at least not right now. We're not afraid of him taking this job back. Ronnie Hillman has clearly earned this job back in Denver. He's been a huge asset for my fantasy team, and he's going to be an asset again this week in the great matchup against the Raiders. He's projected for 16. He probably might even get more than that. Ronnie Hillman, clearly I agree with this, top 5 fantasy play this week. Keep Ronnie Hillman going in your lineups. Next 5, and again, these guys are pretty strong RB1s. Jeremy Hill, I mentioned him. Gio Bernard is out. Love Jeremy Hill in the matchup tonight against Cleveland. You can go with him as a definite RB1. Andre Ellington of the Cardinals going up against the Rams. Rams clearly, oh, that's cool. Okay, I know I'm rolling along here, but I got to make a point of this. If you're watching Thursday Night Football tonight, the guys on the set are wearing Devin Still jerseys for the Bengals. For Devin Still's, I think it's daughter that has cancer. That's cool. So many people have bought his jerseys in support of that movement, for her treatment. That's awesome. So good on the TNS crew for doing that. Bravo to you guys. That's awesome. But anyway, so I just had to throw that in there because I saw that and I'm like, oh, that's cool. But Andre Ellington of the Cardinals, 7th rated, going up against the Rams again. St. Louis having to go to Arizona. The Rams are 29th against the run. That's a no-brainer. You're starting Andre Ellington. They're finally giving him the ball at least. Jamal Charles, even though Buffalo's defense has been stout this year, you can't afford to sit Jamal Charles. He's matchup proof. You're starting him. Le'Veon Bell against the Jets. Obviously, you're starting your Steelers this week, as I mentioned. Big Ben, Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown. Those are normally your must-start guys. When we talk receivers, we'll talk about that situation and tight ends. But Le'Veon Bell is a must-start. Now, again, a guy that I'm really not in love with this week, and surprisingly, again, he's rated this high as 10th, is Eddie Lacy. Eddie Lacy, his struggles this year have been well documented and well highlighted. The Bears are 13th against the run. That's not great, but, Eddie Lacy's inconsistencies, they worry me, but, not bad. I can only rate him as a high RB2. I'm surprised he's projected for as many points as he is for 14, but I think this is really going to be, it's going to be a game where on one side you're going to see a lot of Matt Forte, and on the Green Bay side I think you're going to see a lot more of Aaron Rodgers and his weapons, so it's just going to be a kind of a contrasting style thing. So I don't hate Eddie Lacy this week, but I don't have him as I'm surprised to see him in the top 10. I'm just saying, not a recommended top 10 play for me. 11 through 15, a lot of interesting names on this list. Guys like Denard Robinson, Mark Ingram, Bobby Rainey, Steven Jackson, Terrence West. As I mentioned with the Tampa Bay situation, yes, Charles Sims is coming off of IR this week, but it's his first game back. I'm not expecting a lot from him. I'm still expecting Bobby Rainey to get a lot of the work. I'm starting Bobby Rainey in my league as an RB2, and I think you can use him certainly as an RB2 or a flex. He's still going to get a lot of the work in this matchup against Atlanta. What's Josh McCown going to do? Throw? You might have to if the Bucs are getting blown out again in this game against Atlanta to a Mike Evans or a Vincent Jackson, but when they pound the ball on the ground, it's going to be Bobby Rainey. I really, really like him this week as an RB2. I think you can use Denard Robinson certainly as a high RB2, maybe even a low-end RB1, because, again, Jacksonville, they're not really, against Dallas, they're not really going to throw much. Are they really going to let Blake Bortles throw? Who's he got? Who's his receiving core? I can only name one healthy receiver usually, and that's Allen Robinson. Maybe Marquise Lee. Cecil Shorts gets hurt all the time, so what else do you have at this point if you're Jacksonville? So I think Denard Robinson certainly has separated himself from the pack. No, everyone is forgetting about Toby Gerhart. He's also on Fantasy Exile Island. You know, so yeah, Denard Robinson, I think you can use him. So Bobby Rainey, I think, is probably the best of that bunch. Denard Robinson. The other three, I really can't recommend as starting plays, and I'm worried a little bit this week about Mark Ingram. Yes, he's projected for 13 points, and yes, he's still going to be the main back because probably Pierre Thomas and Kerry Robinson not likely to play this week. But this matchup is so tough. You're hosting San Francisco, and the Niners' run defense has always traditionally been strong, especially it is this year. I think they're third. I want to say they're third against the run. They're fifth. They're fifth against the run. So really, Mark Ingram, I can't rate him as anything more than a desperate RB2 or 3 because of that tough matchup. I'm not really in love with him. But I would still rate him above Steven Jackson and Terrence West. I mean, the matchup screams this could be a great matchup for Steven Jackson playing Tampa Bay, but Steven Jackson is just so inconsistent. He's very hit and miss. Plus, there's a possibility of Anton Smith vulturing a touchdown or two from him. So, I really am not sold on Steven Jackson as anything again more than RB2-3. Same with Terrence West. Again, if you had to use one Cleveland running back tonight, it would be Terrence West. But just really worried about him this week. And of course, the Cleveland running back situation. 16 through 20. Justin Forsett, Lamar Miller, Lorenzo Taliaferro, Chris Ivory, Joyke Bell. So you see the two Ravens in there. Obviously, the Ravens have a great matchup this week. I mentioned it. Justin Forsett obviously is the main guy. He's an RB1. You want to play him. You want to get him in your lineup this week for that Tennessee matchup. But Lorenzo Taliaferro, again, I mentioned, he has taken over the role now as the second running back and definitely the guy the team turns to at the goal line. So maybe you look at, again, with all these bye weeks, you look at Taliaferro maybe as a what-the-heck RB3 or maybe even a strong flex option because, again, there's the opportunity that's going to be there to get touchdowns. So I think certainly both guys are very serviceable starting options this week in your league. Lamar Miller, the debate with him is his health. I mean, he is listed as questionable with a shoulder issue, but he did practice today, so he actually should play this week. Now, the Lions, though, against the run, second in the league, so that's very tough. None of the running backs really in that game, that Miami-Detroit game, to me, are must-starts. Miller, I can really only rate him as an RB2 or a flex, because of that tough matchup. Same goes for Reggie Bush. Joyke Bell, Theo Riddick, I mentioned them. They're more of an RB3, but they're better in PPR leagues because, again, I think Stafford's going to have to throw a lot of passes in that game. So I definitely love Forsett and Taliaferro. And then I'd probably go, I might even put Chris Ivory ahead of Lamar Miller. I know it's saying a lot and being desperate, but here's the thing. The Jets, they're not going to be able to do much against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's going to really tear them apart, and you got to find something. And I don't think Pittsburgh really is great against the run. 11th, that's mid-tier. But you could do worse, really, off as your RB2 or flex. So Ivory, I think, is actually a little bit better than Lamar Miller because of the matchup. So I'll say Forsett, Taliaferro, pretty much on the even same 1-2 keel. Ivory, Miller, and then Joyke Bell because, again, he's going to have a tough matchup with that Miami defense. After Joyke, it's, again, you're really digging deep at this point for guys. The next five are Jonathan Stewart, Chris Johnson, Darren McFadden, Reggie Bush, Frank Gore. Out of that group, I'd have to say, again, if you're desperate, you maybe take a look at Jonathan Stewart because, he's the top option at running back in Carolina, even though it's thin. That Carolina-Philly game is going to have a lot of fantasy points possibly, so maybe there's an opportunity there for Jonathan Stewart to get a touchdown. So, again, I'd say an RB3 or a flex if you're desperate. I am not fond of Chris Johnson. Obviously, Chris Ivory's the better option, so I'm not sold on him. You're not starting Darren McFadden against the number one run defense in Denver. Not happening. And again, Reggie Bush, more of an RB2 or a flex, but again, tough matchup with Miami. And Frank Gore going up against a tough Saints run defense. No, I really don't like, again, you can't love that matchup either. He's also questionable with a hip injury, so you might even see more of Carlos Hyde. So I really can't recommend them as anything more than, again, a desperate RB3. Maybe use Carlos Hyde as a flex, but other than that, can't recommend those guys. And so really at this point, it's a pretty big, drop off. You're really not really using these guys. You can't touch the Rams against Arizona. The running back situation there is a mess. The Bills, again, if you play one, you probably want to play Anthony Dixon because, again, Kyle Orton, the top-rated pass defense against Kansas City, not great. But if again, it's probably best to be avoided. But if you play one, I would still say go Anthony Dixon over Bryce Brown, just because of the fact that he out-carried him last week. And yeah, after that, I can't recommend anyone below that. So that's the bottom of the barrel. Moving on now to the wideouts. Moving on to wide receivers. I would probably say that the Green Bay and the Denver receivers are probably at the top of this list, or from against the Jets. Yeah. So the top 5, and again, these are no-brainers. Antonio Brown, Demaryius Thomas, Jeremy Maclin, Randall Cobb, Jordy Nelson. I mean, those guys usually matchup proof. You're usually starting these guys on a weekly basis every single week. Obviously, Antonio Brown, with Big Ben as hot as he is, he's going to put up big numbers. He's going to be amazing against the Jets. So obviously, you're starting both your top Denver receivers against Oakland. I mentioned that. I mentioned Jeremy Maclin. Clearly the top option in Billy. He's not going to have a drop-off with Mark Sanchez. You're starting him. And you're starting your Packer receivers this week. I mean, obviously, again, it's going to be the Aaron Rodgers show. He's healthy. The hamstring's not an issue. It's going to be him and the receivers. So Randall Cobb, Jordy Nelson, they're going to get their looks. It's Chicago. He's probably going to struggle. So you're definitely going with those guys. Next 5, Julio Jones, Emmanuel Sanders, Calvin Johnson, Alshon Jeffrey, Dez Bryant. You're not sitting any of those guys either. Now, obviously, with it being Calvin Johnson's first game back, obviously there's a lot of uncertainty. But if he's healthy, if he's healthy, you got to have him in your lineup. Full practice this week. He's listed as probable, so you're definitely going to play him against Miami again. You're going to see a lot of Matthew Stafford throwing the football, I think, in this matchup. So you're definitely rolling Calvin Johnson out there. And Dez Bryant, yes, Dez Bryant has struggled the last few weeks. I'm a Dez Bryant owner. I know this personally. But here's the thing, it's not like his bad week last week was not for lack of trying. And I mentioned this to my co-owner, Nate, who's been on the show multiple times before. You've seen him. It's not that, it wasn't for lack of trying. Brandon Weeden still targeted Dez Bryant 10 times last week. Only caught 2 of them, but I think that had a lot to do with Patrick Peterson and then the Cardinals because that defense just closed in on him. So, obviously if Tony Romo plays this week, then obviously Dez Bryant is, his wide receiver 1 self. But even with Brandon Weeden, even in this matchup, you cannot afford to sit Dez Bryant. He's too worthy of a player, too good of a player. You can't afford to sit him. I think you can still safely start Dez Bryant this week. So I think, again, all those 5 guys that I mentioned, Julio, Emmanuel Sanders, Megatron, Jeffrey Bryant, you're starting those guys as usual. Next 5, 11 through 15, we're talking about guys like, again, there's the 2 Bengals, Mohamed Sanu and A.J. Green, both projected for big weeks, and I agree with that. I think you could definitely, again, use both. Green certainly is his normal wide receiver 1 self. Sanu, obviously, I think even maybe with a low 1, high 2 upside, because, again, there's going to be plenty of, Cleveland. Joe Hayden is probably going to be focused on A.J. Green, but Joe Hayden isn't like, but again, he can't stop everything. But usually the number 2 guy gets put on, like, Buster Skrine, who usually is pretty much not exactly great. So Mohamed Sanu will certainly benefit from that. You're starting Kelvin Benjamin. Obviously, again, I mentioned that to start your Panthers and Eagles in that game. Now, Sammy Watkins of Buffalo, he is listed at 14th. Mike Evans is listed 15th. If it were me, I would actually rate Mike Evans a little bit higher than Sammy Watkins because, again, Tampa, is going to be put in different situations. And even though Josh McCown is now back at quarterback, Mike Evans still has emerged as the top wide receiving option. He has clearly leapfrogged Vincent Jackson as the top wide receiving option in Tampa Bay. So I'm starting Mike Evans this week as my number 2 wide receiver because T.Y. Hilton, who I have and been my stud for me all year, he's on bye this week. So I don't have him, so I got to go with Mike Evans. And Mike Evans has played very, very well these last few weeks. I think he's had a touchdown now in, 4 straight games? So I think you got to go with Mike Evans if you're really hurting at wide receiver. So I'd actually rate him just a little bit above Sammy Watkins because, again, he's got the tough matchup with Kansas City. Now, obviously, he's Kyle Orton's pretty much only option. So he's going to get some looks. Obviously, he's going to be targeted. You know that. But I'm just a little worried because of the matchup. I really can only rate Sammy Watkins as a high wide receiver 2. I can't really put him at 1 status. Not in love, but I don't hate him. So I like Mike Evans just a little bit more than I do Sammy Watkins this week. 16 through 20, Golden Tate, Larry Fitzgerald, Martavis Bryant, Brandon Marshall, Eric Decker. I'm surprised that Brandon Marshall is as low as he is. I'm surprised that he's that much lower than Alshon Jeffrey. I would think that Brandon Marshall would have been right there with Alshon Jeffrey on that list because, again, it's going to be – and maybe that relates to the struggle of Cutler. Maybe that's why they are a little bit lower on the list. Or maybe he's why he's as low on the list as he is. But I don't think you can afford to sit these guys. So I'm not going to tell you to sit Brandon Marshall. But his and Jeffrey's success just go as well as Cutler is performing. So, again, I fear – that you're going to, because of this matchup, we're going to see a lot more of Matt Forte than you will Jay Cutler. So, again, maybe that's why if they're rated as low as they are. But you're not going to sit Brandon Marshall. Out of that group, again, I have to say I like Martavis Bryant the best because, again, Big Ben is red hot, and you're playing the Jets. I mean, it kind of goes hand in hand. Big Ben has touched 12 touchdowns in the last 2 games, and he's playing the Jets. Should I really sit Martavis Bryant? Hell no! That's the hell no of the week. You're definitely not sitting Martavis Bryant. You're using him as the number 2, number 3 wide receiver with upside because he has emerged as the second option. He has clearly leapfrogged Marcus Wheaton as Big Ben's number 2 guy, and you are definitely using him in your fantasy lineup. So you're using, out of that group, again, of 16 through 20, I think Martavis Bryant is first. I think Larry Fitzgerald obviously is second because he's clearly Carson Palmer's main weapon, and he's playing the Rams. I think Brandon Marshall is a distant third, but not third by much. Maybe 2A, 2B with him and Fitzgerald. I think Golden Tate is still going to get some work, obviously, with Detroit, but now that Megatron's back, he's not going to get as many targets. And then Eric Decker, of course, is the lowest at that point because, it's going to be him, Percy Harvin, and that's pretty much it. So, not a fan of Eric Decker. Next 5, Steve Smith, Odell Beckham, Roddy White, Michael Crabtree, Justin Hunter. Obviously love Steve Smith this week. Obviously, again, the matchup with Tennessee, Steve Smith should be in your lineup this week because Joe Flacco is going to look for him a lot of the time in this matchup. So I love Steve Smith. Obviously love Roddy White against Tampa Bay. Obviously I think he is a definite strong wide receiver too this week in that great matchup. I actually really like Michael Crabtree this week. Again, Colin Kaepernick, I think with this, it's a good matchup against the Saints, even though they're on the road. San Francisco, come on, it's San Francisco. You know they're going to find a way to compete this week and bounce back against the Saints after that Rams performance. They're going to try to prove that game as a fluke. So Michael Crabtree, I like him this week. I'm going to rate Justin Hunter ahead of Odell Beckham as well because here's the thing. Tennessee, Zach Selfie Mettenberger, is going to have to find a receiver to throw to, and it looks like Justin Hunter is slowly emerging as the guy. It looks like he's taken over for Kendall Wright as the top option. So maybe he gets a touchdown. What the heck, wide receiver 3, I think for me, for Justin Hunter. It's a bust alert, though, for Odell Beckham this week. Why? At Seattle, 12th man. Hi, Richard Sherman. Yeah, you don't think that Richard Sherman's going to be all over Odell Beckham? Yeah, you don't know football. So that matchup really worries me. I mean, obviously, the Seahawks are going to force Eli to throw, but it doesn't mean the Seattle secondary is going to be ready for it. So that kind of worries me a bit. So Again, if you're hurting at wide receiver, you can certainly use Odell Beckham as a wide receiver, maybe a 2 or 3, but just temper your expectations because of the tough matchup. And again, we'll see a lot of Richard Sherman. Next 5, Michael Floyd, Marcus Colston, Percy Harvin, Vincent Jackson, Brandon Cooks. Again, I like the Saints this week. I like this matchup. Obviously, Drew Brees is going to be throwing a lot at home. It's what he does. So I love Marcus Colston. I like Brandon Cooks. I think, obviously, Colston for me is a pretty strong wide receiver, 1-2 with upside. But I like Brandon Cooks, too, as a wide receiver 2-3. I think both can be used in lineups this week. So I'm going to rate them first in that group. I'll probably then put Vincent Jackson third in that group. Again, I think Mike Evans has taken over that top spot, but I think still V-Jack is going to get work. Now, over time, Vincent Jackson was a lot better with Mike Glennon at quarterback than Josh McCown, so that really worries me a bit as well. But I don't think you can ignore Vincent Jackson because of the talent that he is there in Tampa. So I can only really rate him as a wide receiver, low 2, high 3, but just be wary of the fact of the changing of the guard, if you will, in Tampa Bay, at the Tampa Bay whatevers. And then, I'm going to put Michael Floyd ahead of Percy Harvin, but really not by much, because Michael Floyd is worrying me of late. The week that I was playing an opponent that had Michael Floyd and Torrey Smith, and I thought it was going to get crushed, both put up a donut, and Michael Floyd was one of them. I was quite surprised because Carson Palmer was back. He was healthy, and he was looking, normally he looks his receiver's way, but Michael Floyd was nowhere to be found, and it worries me that he's really dropped off late. But again, you might not even have a better option than Michael Floyd as your number 2, number 3 wide receiver, so you might have to play him. So I'm not going to be here and say to sit Michael Floyd, but again, I don't love him. I'm a little worried about his recent inconsistency. Now, I'm not going to say that John Brown has leaped him on the depth chart yet. That hasn't happened yet, but I think slowly he's creeping up the ladder, so just be wary of him. But Percy Harvin, a desperate wide receiver 3 or 4 if you're desperate, but again, him and Eric Decker are really the only weapons in that Jets offense, so just if you're desperate. Next 5 after Brandon Cooks looks like Anquan Bolden, Terrence Williams, Jordan Matthews, Torrey Smith, Devontae Adams. I mentioned how much I really like Devontae Adams as my wide receivers 3, and I'm going with him, and I'm confident because Devontae Adams clearly has a number 3 wide receiver job in Green Bay. He's wrestled it away from Jarrett Boykin. He's had at least 7 fantasy points the last 4 games. He's scored a touchdown, I think, in at least 2 of those games, if not 3. And it's the Bears. Come on. Again, you're going to see a lot of Aaron Rodgers throwing discount double check. It's going to be the Aaron Rodgers show. So, and his receivers are going to benefit. So I'm taking a flyer on Devontae Adams, my number 2 wide receiver this week. I think you should do the same if you got him, or if he's out there in your league. Take a chance on Devontae Adams. At this point in the season, you want players on strong offenses, and this is no exception. Bolden and Williams, I think pretty much solid wide receiver 3s. I think they're pretty rock solid. I like both in their matchups. Again, with the Dallas quarterback situation, whether it's either Romo or Wheaton, I think Williams is still a serviceable play. Jordan Matthews is a guy that you need to watch. Now that Sanchez is the quarterback, yes, Jeremy Maclin is going to quote unquote get his. We know that. But they need a second option. They need a second wheel that's going to emerge. Is it going to be Jordan Matthews? Is it going to be Riley Cooper? I love Jordan Matthews' explosiveness, and I'm scouting him right now. I'm going to kind of look and see what he's going to do. So, maybe not a guy you can really start yet, but really, if it were me to choose between the 2, maybe a wide receiver 3 or a flex, I'd look at Jordan Matthews slightly ahead of Riley Cooper. So they're both getting good target amounts, probably actually equal target amounts, but I like Jordan Matthews just a little bit more. And Torrey Smith, again, I think a serviceable wide receiver 3 this week, again, considering the great matchup against Tennessee. After Devontae Adams, Next 5, Ruben Randall, Kenny Stills, Mike Wallace, Taylor Gabriel, and Andrew Hawkins. And Taylor Gabriel really is only mentioned because Andrew Hawkins might not play. He's questionable again with that, that hip knee issue. So monitor on that. But out of that group, again, I'll probably by default, it's Mike Wallace because, again, he's only really the only option for Ryan Tannehill, really the main option to throw to. So he's probably really the only one I can maybe recommend as a desperate what-the-heck wide receiver 3 because of the tough matchup. Ruben Randall, maybe a wide receiver 3 if the Giants get in the red zone. Kenny Stills, though, with the Saints, though, while I like him, he is questionable for this week with a thigh issue, so monitor that. If he plays, again, what-the-heck wide receiver 3 as well. But after that, I really can't recommend any of these guys after that. You're really getting desperate if you dig into these guys. Guys like a Doug Baldwin of Seattle. He might not even play this week because he's got a groin issue. He's listed as questionable. And Allen Robinson of Jacksonville. Andre Holmes of the Raiders, not against Denver. John Brown, Dwayne Bowe, Marcus Wheaton. You're really digging deep if you are going into these guys. So I can't recommend them as recommended plays. Moving on to the tight ends. Looking at tight ends for this week. So you don't have Gronk. So what do we do now? You don't have Gronk this week. We're trying to find somebody to fill him in. The top 5 for the week, if you're looking at your solid plays, obviously that means that if you don't have Gronk, if you've got Jimmy Graham or Julius Thomas, you're in a really good position because these guys are, again, normal must-starts anyway. It's nice to see Jimmy Graham healthy again. Full practice this week, no issue with the shoulder. He's good for San Francisco this week, and you're starting Jimmy Graham as you normally would. Same with Julius Thomas. Again, I don't say anything more than Oakland. You know that Julius Thomas is in your lineup. Martellus Bennett of Chicago. I actually like him. I actually like Martellus Bennett as probably a serviceable tight end 1 or 2 because, again, in a week full of buys, Keller's got to throw to somebody, and at least, if they get in the red zone, he looks Martellus Bennett's way. So if by chance that happens, then Martellus Bennett is certainly serviceable. Travis Kelce of Kansas City, definitely emerging as a solid tight end 1. So, and again, Buffalo's defense, I think they're more stout. They're more stout against the run, but Jamal Charles is going to get his. So if they get in the red zone, the dink and dunk style of Alex Smith, I think Travis Kelce is certainly usable as a tight end 1. Or if he's somehow out there in your league, not sure how, but if he's out there in your league and you don't have Gronk, pick up Travis Kelce. And I mentioned Greg Olsen. Greg Olsen is as rock solid a tight end 1 as they come every single week. And again, in this shootout game, possibly with Philadelphia, you're going to want Greg Olsen in your lineup. If by chance, though, that Heath Miller is available in your league, pick up Heath Miller if you don't have Gronk, because he's probably the guy that's going to be a huge benefit this week. Because again, Big Ben's red hot. I'm playing the Jets. Gee, can I use Heath Miller as my bye week replacement? Absolutely you can. He was huge for me as a bye week replacement in week 4. When I didn't have Julius Thomas, Heath Miller stepped in, gave me 14 fantasy points in a great matchup. This is another no-brainer. You want to use Heath Miller. Heath Miller, 6th rated tight end this week. I could see him even being in double digits. So Heath Miller is a great play. After that, Larry Donnell, Jason Witten, Michael Rivera, Delaney Walker. Out of that group, I actually like, just because of matchup, I like Jason Witten the most. Yes, there have been times this season where Jason Witten has struggled. But of late, he's getting a lot more targets. He was actually a preferred target of Brandon Whedon. So if that's the case, either way, whether it's Romo or Whedon, I think Witten is a serviceable tight end 1 or 2 this week. So I'd say Miller, Witten. I'll rate Rivera 3rd out of that group as a what the heck, just because of the fact that the Raiders are starting to give Rivera more looks, and they need to throw to somebody. So, what the heck? He might get a touchdown. He might get looks down the field. Why not? So I'll make him 3rd. I'll rate Donnell 4th, because again, if the Giants somehow get in the red zone, they're going to look his way. And I'll rate Delaney Walker 5th, because again, Tennessee receivers really can't trust a whole lot of them. After that, again, you're getting pretty desperate here. Maybe Owen Daniels is a tight end 2 if you're desperate, because again, the matchup with Tennessee is good. But I really can't recommend any of these guys after that. Clay Harbor, Scott Chandler, Charles Clay maybe is a desperate tight end too. Luke Wilson, I'm surprised Vernon Davis is as low as he is. Vernon Davis is only projected for 5 points against the Saints. I'm certainly surprised at that. Maybe it's because of his health and because of Kaepernick's issues. I don't know, but I'm certainly surprised to see him that low. But I can't recommend any of these guys below that. Not even Zach Ertz against Carolina. I hate to say that, but the quarterbacks haven't been looking his way. He hasn't been looked at enough. It's mostly been Jeremy Maclin and Jordan Matthews and Riley Cooper. He just hasn't been targeted enough, so I'm not really fond of Zach Ertz this week. So after that, I can't recommend any other tight end. All right, real quick, rapid fire with kickers and DSTs that I like for this week. Kicking game. Looking at these options again, you don't have Gostkowski, you don't have Vinatieri, you don't have Novak from San Diego, so you're missing a lot of guys. Cody Parkey of Philadelphia. Again, the Philly-Carolina matchup. You might even want to start both guys, him and Graham Gano, because there's going to be a lot of point opportunities in this game, I think. So definitely go with him. Justin Tucker's a no-brainer against Tennessee. So again, because the points are going to be there. Dan Bailey of Dallas, a no-brainer against Jacksonville. Stephen Hauschka of Seattle's been solid all year. You want to go with him. Now, Brandon McManus of Denver. He has struggled of late. He has missed. He missed a couple kicks last week. But come on, this is too good to pass up. You're playing the Raiders. It's a great matchup. You want to stick with Brandon McManus. Interesting rookie, and I mentioned him in the open when I picked this guy up off of waivers. Chandler Catanzaro. Remember the name of the Cardinals. This guy has yet to miss a field goal this season, and he's a rookie. So that's all you need to know. It's kind of like Greg Zuerlein in a way. So when he had his rookie year, so I like him this week going up against those same Rams and Greg Zuerlein. See what I did there? Ha ha ha. But I love him. I love his matchup. Mason Crosby of Green Bay going against Chicago. Yes, great matchup. I actually like Shane Graham of the Saints going up against San Francisco at home. Not a great matchup, but I like him. You can definitely use him as well. Matt Bryant of Atlanta obviously is a no-brainer against Tampa Bay. If you're desperate, maybe Matt Prater against Miami. You could plug him in as a decent option. Obviously, Sean Sweesham of the Steelers going up against the Jets to me is a no-brainer. But after that, I really can't recommend anybody else. The matchup's just too tough or not enough opportunities are there. Can't really recommend any other guys as good options. And then finally, DSTs for the week. You should probably know your no-brainers now based on the matchups I've given you. Cardinals against the Rams. Broncos against the Raiders. Seahawks obviously are starting normally every single week, but against the Giants, yeah, they're going to find a way to shut it down. Surprisingly, the Eagles are listed 4th against the Panthers. I'm not so sure about that. I think that game's going to be more of a shootout than people think. Don't get me wrong, the Eagles D has done some nice things this season, but I'm not so sure on that one. I think Cam Newton is going to find a way to exploit that, and Kelvin Benjamin is going to bounce back, and in a primetime Monday night game. I don't know. I'm a little bit worried on that one. I would recommend the Eagles DST as a must start. Cowboys against Jacksonville. I would actually take them way above the Eagles. Obviously, I've taken the Cowboys DST against Jacksonville. Maybe you play the Saints DST against San Francisco if you're desperate. I mean, again, there's the fear that Kaepernick will have a good game and exploit that. But what the heck if you're hurting? Lions against Miami, I think is a great play as well. The Ravens against Tennessee is, if you're hurting at DST, is a great matchup. Obviously, the Ravens are going to bounce back. They've been carved out the past couple weeks, but they're going to have a great week this week. I'm starting them in my league. Chiefs against Buffalo, I think, is actually a decent streaming matchup as well, because, again, that passing defense is going to limit Kyle Orton, so they're going to try to make them run with Dixon and Brown. So that's a decent matchup. Falcons against Tampa Bay, no-brainer. Steelers against the Jets, no-brainer. Tonight's game, if you look for one, I think maybe you could get it with using the Bengals against the Browns. I wouldn't say start the Browns against Cincinnati, though. But after that, I really can't recommend any other DSTs because the matchups are just so tough. And obviously, the worst D is the Raiders against Denver with 1 rejected point. You're not playing them anyway. And that is it. That's it. That's all the numbers. That's all the stats. That's it. That is it for the week 10. I did it again. 10 edition of the FFSR, the preview for this week. Go out there, get a win in week 10, whether you're pushing for the playoffs, whether you're solidly top in your league and you just want to keep that momentum going, or whether you are just struggling and just trying to play spoil for somebody else. It's still a great game to play as we wind down this season. Tune in again next week for the Week 11 preview edition of the FFSR for your team, your league, your game. Your home is right here. You know where it's at on the FFSR. Good luck. God bless. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and see you next week.